Hey friends, welcome to the Fireside. What you are about to watch and or listen to is an inside Fireside Technique Talk. If you're not familiar with Technique Talks, they are one of our monthly events that we host in the Inside Fireside Tattoo Club. Inside Fireside is a group of tattooers who work together to hone our skills and become better artists. And the difference between a Technique Talk and a traditional podcast that you've probably seen me do before is that the Technique Talks tend to go a little deeper into working processes, materials, things like that of the artists that we're interviewing. So we're a podcast. We might just talk about any random topic. We're a little more dialed in on the Technique Talks, trying to tease out the things that make the artists that we're interviewing, tease out the things that make them unique. Second thing that is pretty different about Technique Talks is that it's not just me and the artist having a conversation. You'll notice our entire Inside Fireside Club is welcome to join and jump in on the conversation, ask questions, share ideas, and things like that. So it's really a pretty unique thing. I've really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite thing that we do in the Inside Fireside Tattoo Club. But if you would like to be a part of the club, or if you'd like to jump in on these conversations with us, you're welcome to join. We would love to have you. We do a ton of fun stuff. I won't go into it here. I will leave a link or a card or something. You'll be able to find out more about the Inside Fireside Club. There's no obligation to it. You can join 1 month, and if it's not for you, you can ditch it the next month. But anyways, I hope you enjoy this technique talk, and I'll see you at the end. Anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure most of you guys, everyone who's on here right now, this is jumping in now. I think everyone who's on here now probably knows who Cooper is. He's been on the actual podcast a handful of times, and some of you guys have probably met him at Paradise, I would guess. I know Mickey, probably James, Dan Medusa's been to everybody, or actually everyone on here has been to Paradise, so maybe you guys all have already met. I don't know.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yup. So yeah, we're gonna, I've got some stuff. Maybe we'll give it another minute or two, let more folks roll in. It also records, so people can go back and watch what they miss. Is there anything in particular? Like you sent me so you sent me some tattoos, and then you sent me like kind of a graph. Do you have a order of operations you want to kind of run through, or do you want to make it like free flow it, or what's the plan?
I figured we'd just talk and see what happens. I mean, I did have some loose ideas, but so basically in the past, or at least with the workshops so far, I haven't really gotten into color much because like all the things that I teach, they're so like woven together that I was trying to find a way to kind of at least give some people the base techniques and before we get into the other stuff, because before I get into color and layering and efficiency and these kind of things, that first part has to work, you know what I mean? But because I've done enough of those now, and I've done a fair amount of black and gray with some of the workshops and seminars, and people keep asking me about color and I haven't done it yet. I figured we'd just start talking about this, and if there ends up being a lot of interest, we can maybe crack into at least some of the logic behind the layering and the way I do it. That was kind of the hope, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see if it makes sense. I may trip across some stuff that I have to backtrack and explain a whole other thing, or, I think most everybody here is going to be at least familiar enough to be able to make sense of whatever gibberish I spit out. So I think it'll be all right,
Yeah, and I think you're right. And color would be interesting because obviously you do a lot of color work. But we got early on, I think we all got kind of caught up in the in your like large fields of gray washes and stuff like that, and so it got real technique based on just like getting smooth fields of gray washes. And for some reason, we got hung up in that discussion. And I feel like we've talked about it in everything that we've recorded together, and I don't think we've ever talked about color or approach to color very much.
Probably not. Yeah, most people in the beginning were asking about large fields of gray, but like, and that's fun. But like during the time since we started that, machines have changed enough that it's made that way more accessible to people anyway. So I feel like the interest is maybe not quite there. I think people could certainly, step up the game with it a little bit here and there, but it's not as like unthinkable as it kind of was back when we first started talking about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but machine technology has reached a point where, like, I think especially if you're getting now that we're dialed into stuff where you have black and gray machines, like that I've got the Bishop shader, whatever is made for black and gray from Bishop. And it's like,
Mhm.
man, that thing has really made it easy to make fields of black and gray compared to coils or even early like Cheyenne pins or stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and I don't remember. Well, I don't remember exactly how much it went over, but if we go back to some of the first times we talked and we break that down, we kind of get into like how a lot of the machines kind of just aren't really mechanically made to like get your speeds low enough and still have a good punch and that kind of thing. And that's what changed in the new machine. So most of these machines, especially pen machines with brushless motors, and you can turn that voltage way down. Now it's fairly easy to get. I would say at least halfway there. Anybody can get halfway there. It takes a little technique to get it really nice, but still, it's made things a hell of a lot easier for people to get after now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's why I
absolutely.
figured we get into color because that's similar in some ways, but it kind of goes in another direction.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, let's I'm sure everyone's cool with that. I doubt anyone has anything against going into some color stuff. I might pull up the some of the photos you sent me and maybe we can just start rolling
Yeah.
in. Do you want to start with photos or do you want to start with that infographic?
I mostly just figured I'd pass those to you and you can kind of use them wherever you feel like is necessary because there's a couple things where when we do get into color, and it's really more about layering with color. That's where layering that people ask about, that comes up a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the ones that I sent you are from kind of a series that I did over the last about 40 years that are very focused on like retrofuturism. So yeah, flip to the next. I'll explain that thing in a minute.
Okay.
We might want a minute to go through that
Okay.
one.
Gotcha. Let's see. Okay. So that's my last one. I might be working backwards. Do you want me to start?
Oh yeah,
Let me.
go all the way to the other end.
Oh, this went right into my generic photos. If you guys get a dick pic, sorry. There it is. Oh, there it is. All right. This was the first one that you sent me. Is this where you want to start?
Yeah, we can. I mean,
Okay.
honestly, I think we probably have to get a little bit into it before I can really give too many examples off of these. But I did
Yeah.
wanted to show kind of a bunch of those that are. It's more about the color use, I guess. I did on these guys just because stylistically, they all have that like kind of retro, sort of like that vintage mid-century poster look.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the color use is it's real. It's chaotic, but it's fun. It's like you're using every color in the crayon box and that kind of thing. And that was
Yeah.
kind of part of the look of a lot of that, rather than what I might do for stuff I would consider to be more illustrative color, which is you're using stuff that probably falls closer into like more painting styles like you're used to, 60-30-10 rule and things of that type. But this is really just catching a type of doing color that also lends itself incredibly well to layering. And so this
Okay.
layering thing, it's more use in color, and it's tied hand in hand with all these things about efficiency for me. And efficiency is a fucking boring word, so most people kind of shut off when they hear it. But I think really I should say it's more about just like all this stuff is. It's really much more effective and only becomes really something that's even worth being focused on when you start bridging from small work into big work. So if
Okay.
people's interests lie in, not just doing a good tattoo, but I want to get into larger work. And, this part here is not so much about, how do we make the composition work or how are we going to change the art and the imagery, but more just how do we make the functional parts of this operate? Because it's what hamstrings most people. There's a good 5, 10, sometimes even, 20-year period where people are trying to transition from small and medium stuff to large stuff and running into obstacles that they never expected, right? It seems like you take the same, one tiny picture and you blow it up a little bit and you just do it the same, but somehow there's all these problems when you get there and it never works the same. And then it happens again when you go from medium to big. So some of these efficiencies that I talk about are basically finding ways to make sense and fix a lot of that. So when people want to bridge into large work, basically your batting average goes up. The amount of hours and time you have to put into something goes down, makes it more manageable from the client's pain standpoint. It makes it more manageable on the calendar, it makes it more manageable for the budget. So it's about getting those efficiencies to all play nicely together without having to sacrifice quality, because that's what most people end up doing. I'm sure all of us see that everywhere. see a lot of guys, they get into big work and they go one way or the other. They're all, oh, I don't want to do big work. It's just too many headaches. I never finish the projects. Or they find some way to start massively cutting corners and just like, oh, I don't care if this entire half of an arm is just scribbly and the lines are like super see-through. And, you know, they very often they're too quick to pull the plug on the quality part, as where with a good plan, it's a good formula for your efficiencies and, you know, some good tactics there's ways to fix that where it works better for all of it without sacrificing quality. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think most people think, and I do too. I think that when you get the larger the tattoos get, the more kind of like room for error that you have, right? Like you can get away with blends not being as smooth in a koi that goes from your butt cheek to your shoulder blade than you can from from something that's just a forearm piece. Like all that stuff needs to be tight.
yeah.
So I think that to your point, that can go kind of overboard. And we both know people. We've had private conversations about folks who have gotten into large stuff and they get sloppier and sloppier and sloppier.
Yeah, and I think to some degree, like I never give people a hard time on that because I think there's at least a curve. There's a learning curve. You know, there's some time where you have to do that just because you're grasping and getting new stuff and getting it under your belt. But if you decide to camp out there and never improve, that's a different problem. But yeah, you nailed it, man. The thing is, most of the time, if we're in small or maybe even up to medium-sized tattoos, we can kind of, I wouldn't say let stuff go. We don't know we're letting it go. You know, the way I start with a lot of young tattooers when we're talking about things is that each skill, each part, if you break down, and that's where that little thing, the wheel thing I was showing you before, basically if you break down each skill on there separately, it's much easier to learn and gain progress. And part of that is that if you try to do them all at once, you don't know it, but you have, I wouldn't say a blind spot, but you just can't see deep enough into each of those topics to let yourself really grow. Meaning, if you know, you can get away with having lines that are okay lines. They look good when they're small. You can get away with having color that's, you know, maybe a little thin and you just didn't know it because you haven't developed your eye to see it better yet. You know, your X-ray vision in that particular area can't see through it yet. Same thing with you know, lines, same thing with fades, same thing with, you know, a bunch of stuff. And so if you take the same tattoo that's small and you go even medium size, all of a sudden you're going to see that and you have to make that decision. You're like, am I just going to say fuck it and just run with it? You know, maybe if I have a couple tattoos, that's fine while you're getting a grip on things and you learn to, you know, find those weak spots and improve on them. Yeah, that's great. But a lot of artists, you see them make that decision right off the bat. They're like, fuck it. It's just things are just shitty and sloppy now, you know, or they go back. But yeah, even if you kind of get a grip on that, you know, you might level up your shading. You might level up your coloring. You might level up your line work. But even when you do that, then you try to go from medium to large. And now your technique is better and your colors, you know how to do colors solid and get them buttery and not have them heal all fucked up. And that takes a long time just to get there. That going from small to medium, you realize you have all these deficiencies in your technical game. And so it could take you 5 or 10 years of really trying hard to get them up to par, right? And then you're a really good technical tattooer. But then you go from medium to large. And now all of a sudden, that's great. But like, how the fuck are you going to get somebody to sit in the chair that long? How are you going to get them to come in? How are you going to get them to not be terrified when you tell them how many hours you got to put into this piece to finish it and not have it shortchanged, you know? So that's where, like, each time you go up one of those levels in a whole unexpected area, there's another dimension to tattooing. There's this undeveloped skill set you now have to fully focus on and do that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Great point. And you probably couldn't even count the number of those variables that change as you go up. So like you said, like the people's time, their pain, like pain management, their finances, the idea that when you go from small to medium and then from medium to large, like you start to tattoo into areas that you would never tattoo small or medium. Like all of a sudden, if you're doing something large, you're working in parts of the body that you would have never attempted before.
Yeah,
yeah.
Now, even if you were good at, like, say, medium-sized, really technical tattoos, even in that area that you thought you were pretty good, you have to level up yet again even higher, because now you have to be like, okay, now I can get perfect lines and fades and, you know, solid one-pass color that doesn't scab or come out thin. But then you got to do it in the crease next to a butt cheek and an armpit and on the inner thigh and all the kneecap and all these weird areas you normally left alone for the most part otherwise. And now you're spending, you know how it is with big pieces. it seems like you spend all your time on the main event, but you're 2/3 of every tattoo is background. It's the, yet even if you find a clever way to go around some areas, you're putting a lot of time back there. So pound for pound, you're spending more of your time in those really difficult problem areas that everybody else avoids. That's your bread and butter now. So if you don't learn to level up, again, it's going to show when you get to the larger stuff.
Yeah.
But that only
absolutely.
pounds the other problem, right? You know, okay, how the fuck are we going to put that many more hours into something massive, you know, and make it,
Yeah.
you know, you don't want to make it untenable. You know, you don't want to shortchange it. We have to, you know, especially considering art styles and those kind of things, we all got to figure out where those lines are for ourselves. But, you know, if we're going to do a good job of it, we have to figure out how to like parse these things out and focus on one by one. So if you want to go back to that Venn diagram I had at the beginning there,
Yeah.
that's kind of what that thing gets into. And it's a slightly altered version of something that my mentor had hanging up when I was first tattooing. And it I've shown it to a lot of other people, and I was kind of, I feel like some of them had the same experience I did, where it just like, you look at it and you're like, oh, that's mildly interesting, but whatever, doesn't really mean a ton to me, right? But as years went on, I find myself coming back to it more and more and more, and finding it to be more and more true. And then that's why I started adding a little more detail on some of those things than what my mentor had. And when we're talking about parsing out our skills and leveling up, this becomes a guiding post. And it doesn't have to be like this, but, or sorry, it doesn't have to be this exactly, but something like this will speed up people's progress, and they'll jump from one to the next a lot faster.
Yeah. Can you go through, can you kind of walk us through how you approach this? Like where you go first and what you're, just walk us through the diagram?
Yeah, so more than anything, basically it just shows conceptually the three main parts of tattooing that forget about the stuff around the outside, just the main parts. And these are where most tattooers of all types are kind of camped out. You know, we all have natural inclinations to being stronger in one group than another. Some artists you'll find they're literally camped out, like they, you know, some of those ride or die guys for coil machines, and you know, they only want to do the same traditional skull on everybody the rest of their life. You know, there's guys that find these spots like that where they'll pick one of those three and say the other two don't matter. But that's where, you know, the Venn diagram, obviously artistry is a big part of it, the craftsmanship, where you apply it to the body and how you make that work correctly. And strategy and tactics is always kind of a weird name. I really would just say service, you know. I feel like, because, you know, that covers so much, but that's kind of where we're talking about today with these other parts. That's where, that's the part that gets left out. So you'll find people that are really good at artistry, you'll find people that are really good at craftsmanship, usually not all three. Sorry, who's talking?
Okay.
I can't quite hear.
What'd you just say? What's the last thing you said? What was the last thing you just asked?
Was that Kurt? I can't hear you.
Oh, I don't know. Kurt, did you ask anything? I don't think so. I was just agreeing with you. If you heard me, I was just agreeing with you. The so go deep. So just, I was thinking strategy and tactics was like planning, I mean, which I guess goes into artistry. So go deeper into strategy and tactics. Like it's the stuff that supports artistry and craftsmanship. So it's the, yeah, like give me some examples of what I mean, I see network and advertising, but like in your
yeah, so basically this tells us like, okay, so most of us, we want to figure out where we're at on this whole chart, and if we're going to continue to grow as an artist, we, rather than saying one area is the only important area, we're not going to care about the rest. We find the areas where maybe we're not familiar with, or we're not as strong and we know it. And then by breaking that down and part by part, we can figure out, okay, I'm going to spend, you know, 3 months just really thinking about this part and this part and this part. So you find yourself traveling around the wheel over time. If you're going to be a really good, really well-rounded artist, you travel around the wheel slowly, and it's kind of a never-ending journey. You're always camping out in one area a little more than another, and then you discover that and develop it, but then you neglected another part, you know, that kind of thing. But this strategy and tactics, or like I said, service area, that's where I think most of us don't really, we don't have as much of a clear set of boundaries. A lot of us will find this by tattooing with people over years in other shops, and maybe they're really professional and they help you some of it, or you're just good with people. We all know some artists that are strong in that area where they're like, they're a terrible artist and they're do god awful craftsmanship, but at the same time, they're always popular. They're always busy. They're doing great, and they make every client leave feeling like they just have the time of their life.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where that area is really strong in the corner there, and the service area. Like I said, each one of those is just different aspects that kind of fall into that category. I don't know that you really need to stick to any one in particular, but yeah, if you zoom in, you can see the little areas where when they
Little
open.
areas, yeah.
So that's just it. Somebody who's a good artist and good at strategy and tactics, yeah, they're fun, but their stuff is messy because they don't have good craftsmanship and it falls apart. It doesn't age well. We know artists that are really good artists and really good at craftsmanship, but they're either snobby or they just have bad people skills and they just can't get it together. So they never seem to get clients.
Mm-hmm.
And, craftsmanship and strategy and tactics, that's great. You're probably really, really busy. You're going to sell a ton of stuff to the public at large, and they're going to love it. But at the same time, you probably don't have the most rewarding stuff, and you might feel a little empty about it.
Yeah.
So I think we all have this experience of being in those situations. So it's not like we're calling anybody out. This is just like, oh, this is when we're feeling this way. Now we have a way of looking at this and saying, oh, I kind of know where I need to work on. I'm going to be happier, and I'm going to have more business. I'm going to have better looking tattoos, whatever it is you're after.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting way to think of it. And I like that you mentioned like kind of going around the wheel so that you're kind of paying attention to all these things. I think in our, we do these Mindset Mondays. We talk about the, different we have these different types of days, focus days and buffer days and free days, and I think I block this right into that. Like most of us feel like that networking and advertising, client management, these service-based things are probably not our greatest skill set. A lot of us, I think, feel like we live up here, but this would be a great way to block this stuff for those of you who are in the Mindset Monday stuff. Like, this is obviously buffer day type of stuff, and this is obviously focus day types of stuff,
Yeah, and then the craftsmanship could be same thing, just during application. That's stuff you mostly learn then. So like I said, we're rotating around the wheel. Not only does it keep us from getting bored, but that keeps you growing. We don't have to worry about stagnation or plateauing, at least in a way that's not healthy. I think most growth actually goes in it's like a stair set. It's like plateaus and then these big bursts of new discoveries and messy upward growth, and then plateaus, where you're figuring out all the parts and cleaning it up. But I love that kind of constant stairwell of upward trajectory.
Yeah.
But this is, I think, a really good way to do that. These things in particular, like I said, this hasn't been updated in a long time. Actually, I can send you one that I think is a little more updated later if you want. But there's a similar way of thinking about all of this stuff called the gauntlet. I don't know if I got into that with you before. Have you ever heard that term? It's like something they use for illustration, and I learned that in school. And
okay, gauntlet. I don't think so. It doesn't sound familiar.
I don't know. I was kind of wondering if I should break into that because that's sometimes its own whole thing. I probably shouldn't mix them up. I don't want to give like too many opposing thoughts on stuff right now. Okay. But anyway, these things basically this is the mindset and kind of where I started. I suggest most people keep something like this, a copy of this if you want, or an updated one I can give you or whatever. And I saw that hanging on the wall when I was an apprentice, and it didn't mean much, but it did stick in my brain, and then it's turned out to be incredibly useful over the years. So I think just kind of having it in the background somewhere, especially for people who are young and learning, it's a really handy thing to have around to show them, whatever part they're getting. It's like, oh, you don't forget about this whole thing and that whole thing. And you can see how they synergize. And they had that little overlap, the star in the middle where, in a perfect world, we'd all be like hanging on that spot a little more,
Yeah.
But
well, I think it's helpful, I think, because a lot of times when you're, maybe you're working, maybe you're working in this area, and you're working technique, tools, and mastery, and it's easy to think that you're working somewhere else. I think that it's easy to forget that these things all exist kind of in different worlds. And so when things aren't going your way, when you're putting needles on skin, you might be thinking a lot about your design or your, what I mean, like something outside of what you're actually working on. I think it's nice to have these kind of corners of the world where you're like, okay, I really need, like, we have an episode coming out on Wednesday with Timmy B which I enjoyed the episode when we recorded it. I went back and did some tweaks to the edit because I didn't love the edit that was done on it. So I went back and did it myself. And a lot of his stuff within the with the well, let me think. Where would it sit? A lot of his planning, his the stuff that he's doing on the artistry side before he gets to the craftsmanship side is really, really thorough. Like he has a very, very clear idea of what's happening by the time he gets to to this area where he's putting ink into skin. And I realized that he's so much more well planned than I am, that he has so probably many fewer distractions when he's over here than I do. Like when I'm over here, a lot of times I'm like back over here. Or sometimes I might be thinking, I'm just kind of like wandering back and forth. And he is very clear on what he did here, which makes him very clear on what he does here. It's funny to see it in this way.
And that's a big part of it, is that, that way when you're doing the drawing and the art, you can be fully encompassed with those things, separate the parts of your mind that are basically a problem for, tomorrow or another day or something of that type. And then you can be more fully engaged in what you're doing.
Yeah, because there's a time and place for you're not going to forget the thing because there's a time and place for this part of it, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with the free focus buffer thing.
Yeah, and then when you get to craftsmanship, if you're worrying about your core concept and the stuff that should be during the drafting phase anyway, when when you're actually putting it on the skin, you're probably kind of in trouble. But being, in a perfect world, like obviously we'd have them all figured out. We're always evaluating, we're always changing, we're always adding little tweaks as we go. But it does help to be in that mindset of like, okay, I put all these things down. I did the work. I can trust myself, have confidence, and when you do that, you can move faster too. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, dummy question for you: how do you get your screens to pop up again? I'm like, I haven't used Zoom in ages, and I'm sitting here putting buttons, trying to figure out how to make I can't see you guys. I'm trying to see you guys again.
Oh, it's because I'm sharing this screen. I'm sharing it to everyone. So if I drop that, then we're back to whatever you can see. Yeah. So I was doing a screen share for everybody.
Okay,
cool. And now you're pinned.
Sorry,
so
I'm can see you. So like I'm figuring out. I'm just hitting buttons as we go here.
Yeah. Well, let's since we quit screen sharing, let's ask, because we have 11 people on now. Any thoughts on that Venn diagram or on anything we've talked about so far? Any questions or do we want to move on and start talking color stuff? Anyone? You can ask out loud. You don't have to. All right. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yep. Hey, Coop. Just wanted to say thank you very much for your time. Already super informative, like always. And I don't really have anything to add so much as to say, like, I agree with everything that's on that, and that's like absolutely core to everything that I do. So yeah.
You're one of those guys that I'd love to get into the that stuff with the gauntlet more later. Ask me sometime, and we can, like, when I see you, and we'll take a night at the bar and break it down. I know you like things broken down in a technical, similar way that I do, so I think you might get a lot out of it.
Definitely, please and thank you.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, maybe let's roll in. How do you want to move into color stuff? You want to? I guess we're talking more color theory. We're more on the artistic side of the Venn diagram right now, and not as much in technical, unless people want to go technical on it, or no.
Yeah, I mean, we can. Part of it, like I said, it's more about the planning, and I guess kind of just getting into my logic. The nature. Anybody who's been to much of my things or talked to me very long knows that I'm I kind of get into the weeds with the details on stuff, but I kind of wanted to show people the logic, the nature I have of kind of parsing out the elements. Everything that I find, everything that I encounter, I see as a puzzle to be broken down to its constituent parts and then rebuilt in as many different ways as you can until you find the best combinations that you can find, right? And that's kind of how I see art, and because it's problem solving. So much of art is about problem solving. We know what we want, or we want to discover something fun, but we break it down part by part and do that. So that's kind of the logic behind my efficiency, and that's where that was going to overlap with color. I don't know if that answers your question or not. So we might have to kind of like dip our way back and forth a little bit.
Okay.
I'm being a dummy, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get the screens to come back because I can't see anybody but myself.
Oh, it's because you're spotlighted. So do you want to see the people in the group? I'm showing everyone you. You're the presenter, so I'm
Oh,
showing.
that's fine, I guess. Yeah, I was
Okay.
just trying to like see who's
I
talking.
think I think a lot of people
fine.
do not have their cameras on. Yeah, most
Okay.
people don't have their cameras on.
Yeah, I can't see you either though. So
Oh,
on your
okay.
button.
If you go to the top corner, there's a view button, and there's speaker, gallery, multi-speaker. If you go to gallery, you'll see whoever. Like I can see you, Kurt, and me.
That's much better. Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. So, okay. So, do you want me to is there anything in particular you want me to pull up in this?
No. So basically, I'm trying to think of where would be the best way to start. Give me just a second to think.
Okay. I mean, I have plenty probably of questions about your approach to color because it doesn't always, you're one of those folks that like your color. You're kind of like one of the techs like James Tex or Steve Moore, one of those guys that I see in a way that I'm like the color ideas aren't as obvious to me as they are with a lot of folks. Like like I just said, we did this podcast with Timmy B, and like if Timmy B has a purple background, he's going to have some golds and yellow in the foreground. He's going to use some grays to mute like everything.
Yeah.
I understand the choices that are made, and they seem very straightforward. It's the same way that I make choices, but then like you'll do something like James Tex or like Steve Moore, where you have a lot of kind of what I would consider intense colors working together that sit in different points on the value scale, but they don't always like the warm, cool stuff doesn't all you're not always thinking that way. You'll have like purples and reds together, and then a gold back around here, and then a teal over there, and then but they all kind of they do come together and they work from but
So I definitely like the idea, and this might just be my personal compulsion. As soon as I find a really good color formula, I have to stop using it. Like,
okay.
and that's a compulsion. It's more that I just don't want to be somebody. I've known a few artists that are like that, and they kind of do good stuff, but it's like, you know what? They only do blue, and then they use like a little bit of gold or yellow, and then like everything is like that. And sure, it's popular, like especially if like people like a particular color to use. But I don't know. To me, it drives me crazy if you just have you kind of just check out. You find one good formula, and you're like, I'm done thinking about color the rest of my life. So I'm always trying to discover something that sort of goes against the rules or sidesteps all of it. You know what I mean? It's again, it's about me parsing out the elements and trying to find a new way to put all the pieces together like a Lego set and seeing what I can make out of it that hasn't been discovered yet. These photos I sent you, the reason I picked those out is because they're all part of the very specific aesthetic we were going for. So like I said, I had fun with them, but I don't know that those are all the things that I would pick if I get to do whatever I want. You know what I mean?
Okay.
A big part of why I focus on this series is number one, it was just scratching the itch of like, I really love that kind of mid-century poster art that, the old vintage travel posters and that kind of that era of illustration and sci-fi futurism, right? So there were things of that very classic era where they were like that, very thick, bright pastel colors and very punchy, more line-based stuff that works well for tattoos. And so I just saw within that style, I saw a chance to do some experimentation and find a way to mix that with my other formulas as I'm figuring out, the high efficiency formula stuff. Like, how are we going to get all these pieces finished? How are we going to get stuff to the highest levels of quality and also coming in time and budget and make sure the client doesn't crawl out of the chair and run away and never want to come back and all these kind of things, right? So I just felt like this set was not only visually interesting for a couple of years, but it was probably the best testing ground for me to figure out how to make all these moving parts click. So I do like the series for that, and that's why if you flip through those, you'll see that there's very similar coloring on all of them. They're very, very pastel, but a lot of stuff going on. Obviously I'm playing with texture a little more in some of those than I think the classic stuff would. But as far as the overall aesthetic, it's kind of that mid-century poster art look.
Yeah.
And so that's fun. I would say that last one you were on, if it's just the top area there, that's probably closer to the stuff where if I get to do my own, it's probably more like that, like one or two colors. You know, sometimes some accent colors, but like I said, you know, as much as I tend to rally against a simple formula, you know, that it's really hard to, and I think it's just because instinct in the human eye, it's really hard to not go back to something close to the like 60-30-10 kind of rule, because that's just what the eye likes to see.
Go through the 60-30-10 rule. I don't know if I know it. What is
It's basically, it's a lot of painters, illustrators, you know, photographers, videographers, you know, cinematographers, that they use that for their lighting a lot of times. But
Okay.
it's a matter of picking out tone. So one of the more complicated things that fucks everybody's head up is when you try to find the harmony between tone and color, right?
Yeah.
And trying to do that without changing your color. Like you pick colors you like, but you have to find tones that also work for a good tone pattern, right? So that this becomes like a puzzle, like a Rubik's Cube we got to figure out. So that's one way that helps with that too. But part of it is you start with the lighting, but then you find color that adheres to the same rules of the lighting. So whether that's density on the scale of like 1 to 5, or, you know, 1 through 10 for light to dark, or just for different colors in proportion, it's about, you know, 60-30-10 is kind of like proportionately you get 60% of, you know, something, you know, your dominant color, your dominant tone. 30% is the accent one that sets that off, and 10% is one that sets both of those off that you use to direct attention around the form.
So it applies to both color and value, like tone, like the dark light.
Yeah, or it's in some ways it's kind of a conversation with where the two of those meet. You know what I mean? Like if there's like a crossroads between those successful areas where you can have successful color combinations and successful tone combinations, and you can do that and get a good tone. So that seems to be one of the most successful things that happens there, is that you find that 60-30-10 rule happening a lot. And then it also makes it much easier for you to pick colors without having to, again, you know, it's not hard and fast rule, but it's a good, I guess, a guiding post to start with, you know. You're like,
so in this, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, so for that one, same thing. Like I said, you know, the 60-30-10, and that one would be like 60% green, 30% reds, and 10% blue. And the blue lines are just enough. It's so little that it just sets it off a little bit, but you don't really get a big feel for it.
Yeah.
And,
but if I drop it to grayscale, would it kind of be 60% one, like 60% dark, 30% light, 10% whatever, like highlight or something? Or would I, or
ideally,
do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, ideally that's what I'm aiming for, but it might not. I mean, because I've heard some people try to say that too. And then I think sometimes people, they want the numbers to be magic and they want to make that work too much. So they're like, oh, but if you do that, it'll also be like one will be a 60%, you know, gray, and the other will be a 30% gray, and the other will be a 10% gray, or something like that. Just, you know, they're a little too glued to the numbers. So I try not to overthink that part, but the idea is the same. You do want to separate, just like we do on the grayscale. You want to separate your grays so that, you know, they're not all leading onto each other on the grayscale, and that creates contrast and interest and all that. But you know, you do the same thing with color. But this one is maybe not the, well, it probably still would be okay, but it's still not probably the strongest one with that. That is why we went with a darker pink foam, because in black and white, those are still going to have contrast where you can see the parts separate. You know what I mean? So that's the idea, though. Same idea. Yeah. So when we're doing this, we're trying to find, you know, one formula that's hard to nail down is color that works well together. The other formula that's hard to nail down is, you know, black and white that speaks to you and naturally you don't have to squint and figure it out. You know, we're trying to find the spot where those two things intersect without having to give too much ground. And personally, I find that I usually try to lean more towards it. If one has to give up ground for the other, I would prefer that usually the color gives up ground for the tone. I would rather have the black and white contrast be a little stronger, you know what I mean? But that's part of why, like, and this one's a little different because you know, he's an add-on. So we kind of didn't do the whole formula for him because he is the crowning top of this pinup girl down below.
Right.
And, you know, her with all the black she has in her hair, that's where the formula, like if you want to flip to one with her, she's a better example of that 60-30-10 rule.
Yeah, I was looking at her earlier. Okay.
Yeah, and so like 60% of that, you know, obviously is the, you know, the more mid-tone, the flesh tones that vary a little bit, but the 30 punchy black, and then, you know, 10, you know, for little reds and open space. But yeah. But same thing. If you squint at that, you can still read it. If you see it from far away, you can still read it. But if you see it in black and white, you can still read it. You know, that's passing the test. And honestly, saying it like that, honestly, that kind of gets underground. That's what the gauntlet is that we talked about before, is you kind of finding a number of boxes and you got to find a way to make all the little sliders and levers work together. And that's how you kind of pick a winner for each piece. It's a little too much puzzling for most people. So I don't really try to put it on people that I think are not necessarily down for like sometimes obnoxiously complicated puzzles, but it's extremely rewarding when we get into it then.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, and you talk about tone, or value being being the most important element. You do a lot of heavy color line work, more than most people that I know. But like, as cool as the blue line is as a graphic sort of element in this piece, really the reason that if it were black, if that outline were that heavy and black, it would completely change the tattoo. The thing isn't that it's blue. It's that it's lighter than this. It's lighter than the black. It's lighter than the eyelashes, right?
Exactly. And
it's
the 10% in this one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can do these really, and it's obviously very bold and very graphic, and it has this, like all of all the pattern based stuff that you do. It's like little like emojis and stuff that are like sprinkled through all of your tattoos that are so cool. But really, like, if you think about that, if you guys who are watching, if you could visualize this blue line being black, it would completely change the look of the tattoo. It might still work fine, I don't know, but it would completely change the hierarchy of shapes in the tattoo.
Exactly. And that was a bold choice we had to make early on for that one to make it work. But that's actually probably a good segue into the other formulas and actually choosing and laying out color. Basically, any effect we have, we want to make sure obviously it's going to last, it's going to age well. If we kind of take a few steps back, I want to kind of introduce people to my logic. Is that somebody talking again? Sorry, I can't hear. Somebody's asking a question.
I don't think so. No, most time they'll raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I think we'll see.
Okay,
the hand's back on now, so
figured out.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, let me take a step back and explain my thinking with color and kind of where the layering concept comes from, and kind of how it's logic based. It's not so much like I know other guys that do really good in layering. Actually, Timmy, you just had on, is amazing with layering. And I know a few biomech guys that are really good. It used to be kind of a dirty secret in tattooing where people would do it and do amazing work, but people would want to give, especially traditional mindset guys would be wanting to give everybody so much shit for doing layering because, they always want to say some shit like, oh, I can get it done the first time, and, shit like that. And then, you got to go through that whole thing where you have to go through their portfolio and point out all the shitty color, and then they hate you, and, all that shit. So, so anyway, what I started doing when I was working in Hawaii years ago is, that was back into the tribal, being a big thing. At least the kind of pointy tribal, like the Leo Guletta kind of stuff was everywhere. And it was huge. People were getting, the tramp stamp, the armbands, all that kind of stuff. But one thing I noticed early on, and I saw this in, I read that Tattooing A to Z book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Spalding book.
Yeah, that was the first thing I ever got. The kit from there, and was a scratcher and all that shit, right?
Same here.
Yeah. But one of the things that stuck with me in there is how he would talk about how in black and gray tattooing, things would look so much better if you, after a couple of years or 10 years when it started to fade, people would come back and they get a touch up on it, and then it would look better than it ever did. And that always kind of stuck with me. And, it's like you get an excuse to go back and make your stuff look right, which is great, honestly. I don't know why, especially hearing from a traditional guy, I don't like that. I don't know why traditional guys are a little more on that. But one thing I noticed after years of going through the tribal phase and everything else, tribal was a big one where people would get solid black. Hey, I'm sorry, I hear somebody talking really loud in there. Do you guys not hearing that? Or is that just me?
It might be. Let me mute myself because I've got a room full of people. Let me mute myself real quick and see if it makes a difference.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like I said, we're at Airbnb. I got like 12 people in the kitchen over there. So I'll mute and I'll unmute when I want to talk.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So where's that? Oh yeah, the black and white. So okay, the logic from all this layering stuff comes from a point where we would start to see people come in and they do that typical thing a lot of people would do with tribal stuff where they're like, oh, but it's not as dark as it used to be and I want to do it again. And, it seemed like you're chasing your tail forever. You have to explain to them, it's like, oh, well, it's just because it aged and it settled in and that kind of thing. That was at the point in my career where I started actually taking photos of every last thing I did, not just the stuff you want to show off, but every last thing, and try to figure it out. And I had regular clients coming back around enough. One of the things I noticed on there was that when people came back and did that, whether it was color or tribal or whatever, once you got that second touch up, it does settle into the skin and lighten again, but not nearly as much as you think it does. It actually does stay. And so it really started to become obvious after a couple of years of doing that, how essentially, even if we hit the skin, say we're doing color, black, solid black, like tribal, we're getting one pass black, we're doing as good as we can, where it's absolutely as saturated as you can get, meaning ink in the skin wise, saturated as you can get. And you having, that person heal up okay, it doesn't cross that threshold where it's getting all fucked up and you're losing a lot of extra. Every last thing goes right. Somehow everything goes right. That is still only about 60 to 70% of the visual capacity of what the skin can hold. Meaning if you get another 40 or so percent ink in there, you couldn't do it that day because the skin wouldn't hold it wouldn't heal right. But if you do it at a different time, the touch up when they come back later, or if you want to do another layer, it actually stays noticeably darker and smoother and brighter forever. And then once you realize that, it's just a matter of figuring out how to make that work for you. So you got to find, you can go through the whole bag of tricks, a lot of stuff that we learned coming up, you're kind of not allowed to do or not supposed to do because it doesn't age well. And now there's a whole lot of tricks you can pull back out of that area that are actually quite usable if you use that rule or you find other ways to make them work, space things out well enough. There's a whole bag of tricks we all know for stuff like that. But I think I was just a little more, just a little more particular about how I was putting those together and making sure we're getting exactly the right percentage and all that. So basically I spent the next 10 years really documenting all that stuff, figuring out a good formula of, okay, how do we get that stuff in there? And then the next 10 years I spent after that, once I started seeing these great results, I started seeing tattoos that are 10 plus years aged, bright colors, and surfers in Hawaii that sunburn the shit out of their tattoos all the time. And they still look great. They still look basically brand new. In San Diego too, I'd see people come around 10 years later and people would ask them all the time, oh, is that a new tattoo? And it's clearly, if you look close at it, you can see, tattoos do what tattoos do. The lines are a little thicker, maybe slightly fuzzy because they're 10, 15 years old, but it's all very saturated and very much there. So once you figure out that level of brightness and contrast can be there, and now it's a matter of, okay, how do I get from A to Z the fastest and make it to where it's not too cumbersome to get done every time? At that point, obviously, we have to be in one form or another talking about layers because we either need to do 100% one time and then get that extra 40 or 50% in some other time, or we can do 2 layers of like 75% each so that they go faster and heal lighter. And then we got these different percentages we can fuck with. And that's where things come down to, all my fucking formulas and, where I get a little in the weeds about shit. I won't bug you with too much of that. But the idea is that now blue lines, where we couldn't do blue lines for outlines and stuff, that works, but only at that scale. We got to know where the parameters are, right? But all that is dependent on getting that second layer. So I had to parse out my work and be like, okay, I have standard work and I have layered work. And, I have to approach them different. The client has to know that going in and know it's a layered project. So if it's not going to get that second layer, it's never going to look right. It's never going to be properly finished. So kind of basically don't start it if you're not going to finish it like that kind of thing. But you also need to be prepared to tell clients, okay, it's going to take longer. It's going to cost more. It's going to do all this, but look at the results. They are noticeably better. They last noticeably longer. We have tricks we can get away with that everybody says that they can't do and you shouldn't do. And all of a sudden they're working for you and they're lasting decades looking great. So that's the logic. That's where I started. Right.
Yeah,
So,
I think, and I also think, especially as you're moving into moving into large scale work, I think is important because so one of the things that I've noticed with large scale work, I've got one guy in mind as you're talking that I've been tattooing every month since like 2018, and we're almost done with a bodysuit at this point. But I can remember doing these big peonies up his arm, and I used like a lipstick red, and I used it too far, and it was too dark. and it healed and it settled, and we were on to another sleeve. And because he's the type of dude that just wants to hang out and get tattooed and he can afford it, I went back into it with like a peach, and I packed a bunch of peach over something that was darker than it. And now that's 5 or 6 years old. And I'm like, man, the best blends I've ever made were things that went too dark and I packed light stuff over the top. Well, whoever gets to even try to do that? Like, well, how do you even know that's a thing until you get those opportunities? I think it's the greatest learning experience.
That's why I've been so obsessed with it since I started it, because, you know, I mean, obviously tattooing is hard and art is hard, and it's a never ending journey. But there was a point for most of us somewhere around the 10-year mark where we're like, oh, I got a pretty good handle on this. And you're looking to find a way to step on the gas or do something different. And for me, that was when I discovered that. It was a little before that, but I knew that all that was there, and I was ecstatic because I'm like, man, now we kind of talk about stuff that's more like oil painting techniques, or you know, like, you know, I think you went more that way and I went more the poster print texture kind of stuff, like textured illustration. But all these things can work now. We just have to do the math and figure out a responsible way to do it, where it keeps the tones and it keeps the textures and it keeps the, you know, all the work we're putting in is not just, you know, work that's going to disappear on somebody in 5 years or is for nothing. But so long as we're doing it with that intention and actually good, you know, usable, workable object rather than just making bullshit up, then now we have all these possibilities, man. We have all these things available to us that I think it's like having toys other tattooers don't get to play with, you know? So anyway, that's where I started fucking with the poster print stuff because of that, because I love that look, but I found for me, it was more efficient to do most of my work in a way where I lay down a solid flat color and then we add the extra 50% later. Very often that's how I like to do my layers, because that means we're getting the most done. You know, I think most tattooers who do layering will tell you one thing they discover, you know, part of the beginning part of that journey is you spend a lot of years experimenting on people, friends, regular clients, and you find the things that work and the things that don't work. And you know, the number of those things are things where you have to keep reworking areas or keep trying to change something because they settle. And so you do come up with some certain rules, or I would say maybe not rules, but, you know, some guidelines. And, you know, a lot of that has to do with biology and things that we can't change, things that aren't up to our choices so much as they are up to just what the body does. And we have to learn to work with those parameters. So I'll tell you right now, there's a couple things that'll work well. If you can't get it done in 2.5 layers, you need to rethink how you're doing it and what you're doing, because that's what the skin can take. And so if you're really technical, you're really good at not overworking people, but also not coming up light, you surf that line really well right down the middle, and you're doing all the little things right. If you go over anybody for solid color more than like 2.5 times, you know, not for everybody, but for some people, that's where skin textures start to get fucked up. They start to get weird. Weird things will happen. I really don't like to hit the skin that hard. But you'll notice that even like you're saying, if you want to change colors on stuff, 2.5 to, you know, somewhere between 2 and 3 layers, things really stop changing anyway. So yeah, this is a good example here. This girl is a great way to show, I think, actually, I think I have 3 of those in there. So flip between those real quick for me. You can see the texture I put down. Yeah, go back to the girl's face. I kind of zoom in on that a little bit. So basically we put down the base layer. We left the negative space for the little bit of highlights, so a little bit of planning, got it very soft like it does, but we did a nice, smooth, soft, flat base layer, foundation layer. We let it heal in really good. And so I've got all the formulas timed out with my sleeve, so I know how long it takes. But I also found there's a sweet spot for layering where it's about between 3 and 6 months. If you get the second layer in at that time, the texture in the skin does much better. It accepts ink better. They blend and stay blended better in a way that looks nicer, longer. And they all settled at the same place in the end, so they look great. But they're, you know, if it's early on, especially if something didn't go 100% perfect, you know, most of us at this point, we have to be really good at the technical game to get much out of this. But even then, if, you know, who knows, somebody has something weird happen with the skin, they went on vacation, got a sunburn or scratched, you know, shit happens, right? So if I give everybody 3 to 6 months, you know, in between layers, everything goes perfect. And so I've just learned to parse out the sleeve. That they basically, my start and finish times, I've kind of broken it into pieces where I start this and I work on this, I get the foundation, then I work on these other 2 things. And then by the time I'm done with those 2 things, the foundation's settled long enough and I go back and do the second layer. we kind of build the whole thing out with a formula, and that's what keeps it efficient. So, you know, we're still doing big, complicated pieces, but we're also doing it in a way that is, you know, is making it workable for people. Even if the people want high-end stuff, you know, nobody wants to be getting tattooed forever and not have the thing done, right? So we got to really think about how to, you know, we want to play with all these new toys, but we want to make sure we keep this all within a workable, realistic range.
Yeah, yeah. When I was zooming in, I was looking at this earlier when you sent these over, and what I loved about this, like I didn't realize at the time that you had put the. I kind of thought that you had done the shading for. I always think of shading as an underlayer, and then laying texture, or then laying the solid fill over it, which you did the solid fill, and then I guess peppered these browns
Yeah.
on it, which, and that makes me think of, like, you know, when you hear like art historians talk about folks like Rembrandt, and they say like the great thing about people like Rembrandt is you can't tell what stroke was applied where. Like it's almost impossible to break Rembrandt's process down because everything like lives it. Like, was that the first stroke or the last stroke? Like it's because of the way that they work. And obviously this is more graphic, you know, than that, but I got that same feeling from it where I was like, man, I'm not exactly sure what you did first, second, and third here, which I'm fascinated by. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying texture because, like I said, when you break the 2 layers up, or, you know, for me, that's what I found over years. I really don't try to go into the 3rd layer range unless we absolutely have to for some reason. But when I break things into the 2-layer range, I'd end up doing the bulk of it on the first one instead of doing them half and half. And because, you know, foundation is slower and you got to blend it out, so it's super solid and takes longer. And then I'd approach the second one, and this also makes it faster, less painful, and more efficient, more cost effective. But we do it like shading. So you'll find that there are a lot of painters and illustrators who get a certain look by doing their foundation colors 1 to 2 tones lighter than the tone that goes on top of it. So the foundation layer is lighter instead of darker, the opposite of what you said that first time, at least for this look, you know. But then that allows the details and textures to really show without having to go back and do yet another, like a 3rd layer or something like that. And so as long as we're taking our time on those texture ones and really getting the saturation, even like on that other one with the girl's face, the all the dots, yeah, if you zoom in there, that's what we did. Is it was a smooth skin tone layer, and then we went in with a textured needle, a textured mag. I don't know if you've used any of those, but they're fucking awesome. Or sometimes even just
Who
like
are,
a,
who are you using those from? What needle are you using?
I got them right here, actually. I don't know if you can see them. Let me see here.
Who's the manufacturer? Black Claw? What is
They, you know, a few companies have started picking them up. This one, it's a Chinese company. It's Grip, the Tri-Flat. No, I guess those are, yeah, that's a textured mag. But they have ones on a triangle shape that I think are a little better. Because every other one, it's like basically there's a 3-round and then a reversed one. So you get the butt end of it and it makes a gap. And then you got another one. So you have a triangle made out of 3 of those, but they're spaced really far apart. So you get this really beautiful,
Oh.
that's where this is from. And I
So
can
they're spinning needles upside down and using them as spacers between the needles that are pointing the right direction.
Exactly, yeah. So
Okay.
they're really widely spaced out, and so the texture is, you can be much more aggressive or assertive, I should say, maybe not aggressive. But that's one of the things with this, especially with textured stuff, is that a lot of it's really cool, but also it can entirely go away. It doesn't have to. It depends on how you use it. But if you want that texture to stay, and in this case, we wanted that vintage look. We wanted that slightly sort of crumbly look. So we started off going really aggressive with the texture, knowing that it's going to heal to being halfway that way. So that's where, if you look at the other 2 photos, I think the next one, that was right after we did it, that first one you just looked at. Let's see. Oh, actually, go back. It was right above that one. Yeah, that one. And so that one, I think, is just a few, or no, this one, sorry, is right after. You can see how aggressive it was on there. It's much more notable in the texture, especially if you look on our arm and shoulder and stuff like that. I think part of this might be being lost just because of the photo quality too.
Yeah,
But
no, I can definitely see a big difference
or
there.
yeah. So that underneath, that shine, the middle part of the shoulder shine, that's the base tone. That's how light I went for the foundation. So that was just like 1 tone darker than skin tone. And the entire thing we did wall to wall, and we did this, you know, it faded from skin tone to pink down to a nice hot pink at her toes. And but we got that same thing. So we like, look at the thigh closer there. We did the same thing. We just took a dark red. So we took the complementary, you know, whatever the tone is going to be to complement that. And we just used a very dark version of that to keep our contrast and also keep the texture really high. But you have to be pretty assertive, like I said with that one, meaning you're not grazing and making grayish dots. You're like every dot has to be in there, has to be solid. Because now if you go, go back to that the first face we were looking at. You see the difference. I got them mixed up. This is the one that was healed in for I think just like a couple months, like maybe 3 months. And then that last one was when it was healed. So that was about like maybe 8 or 9 months later. Yeah, there you go. And you can see how it's still there, but it's smoothed out a lot. So it has that, it looks almost like dry brushing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What a great, that's cool that you got the photos through all three. Okay, so this is 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
This is what,
that's like a month or two after.
Okay. And then fresh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, what a huge, so just like that. So that right there to me is the most obvious area of kind of peppering.
Yeah. And that's the thing with that effect. It's kind of scary when you first do it because you're like, oh man, this kind of looks hard. I almost got to like talk my client down a little bit and let them know, be like, don't worry, I promise this is going to look perfect. It looks a little rough, but
and look at the soft edges of the highlight, like just perfect.
And especially combined with the newer machines we have that allow us to do that. If you take that triangular, the stipple mag I was telling you about, and you run that in a bishop or something of that type, and you run it super low, like as low as you can get it to work and still get really solid dots out of it. Like for me, that's at about 3 volts, like 3.2. And but if you do that over it, I mean, you can get not only that cool texture, but you have such control that it's kind of like really controlled black and gray shading over your color. You're just doing basically color over color shading at that point. And so that
you're not whipping this at all. You're physically making dots.
No, I'm actually using that's kind of how I talked about before, how me getting started with the application techniques is kind of why I started there, because they're tied. So this is volleying technique. So this is a way that makes it where like you can get really solid fills and shades that are really controlled without notable edges or brush marks, but you can do it really slow and really even, and you zipper them together in such a way that they are unnoticeable unless you want them to be noticeable. But it's made for doing really large fields with really a high amount of control. And but anyway, that's what we do, is we're basically doing volleying shading off of with that stipple mag at a low speed. And so that checks several things at once. And this gets back to the gauntlet where we're solving several problems all at a high level, where it does the illustrative texture that we want. It does the it adds the extra 40% of ink that we wanted to to finalize all that stuff and basically make it's punchy and textury enough that it lasts when it ages well. And also it keeps it efficient enough that the clients they can come in, they can afford these sessions because the second layers are much faster. They're like half the time of the first ones. So it's almost more of a blending layer than a solid foundation layer, And a lot of times when you're going through these big projects, there's this big hump in the middle that's really hard to get past. And it's where progress seems to slow down, at least from, the client standpoint or other people seeing it being built. It looks like it really slows down to a crawl, and it's a little less satisfying. But then we get over that hump and you get to this stuff, it kind of brings that back up, and it gets to be really exciting, and the pain is dramatically less. The healing is less. It's cheaper. It's a less of a time commitment. So it kind of really puts a lot of wind in the client sails as far as managing their experience when they're there too. Because in that second part, when you get to that hump, that's another part of that whole, the first diagram we were looking at, the strategy and tactics, or the service part of it, is really being, not just good at treating your clients well, but really coming up with a plan that is going to work with them and continue to work with them to get the projects finished, and be not just their cheerleader in the moment, but you really have to be kind of their coach and their planner through the whole thing too. But that's a big part of that. It's finding a way to, when we know we're going to get into the tough stuff where some people might, hesitate to come back in or start dragging their feet, taking a little longer in between sessions, that keeps them coming back. So you give them a second layer and they see the progress, they can finally see where it's going, and it gives them a lot of motivation, and it was fast and it was easy and it was cheap, and it makes the whole thing much easier to handle. It's just at that point they can see the goal, they can see the finish line, and that all their hard work is actually paying off.
And you
So
can, one of the great things about that, I was just kind of looking at this part of it. I look at these parts of the arm so much because it's like what you see when people are
yeah,
out, and that
the hard part is
that's such a cool arrangement of shapes and tones. But what I was going to say real quick before I forget is that approach keeps you, anyone who does big work knows that at some point you have to do there's like a full day of like here to here stuff that they never see, and even no matter how cool it works, you still feel like it's a disappointment of a day for the client because it's like in this no man's land area. Whereas
yeah.
if every time they get to see progress on something that they see, like they like it, and it gets better and better and better each time, that's
Yeah.
such a huge win,
And that, there's a couple of actually useful pointers I can give you for stuff like that I think make the clients a lot happier, makes everybody, get through the whole thing a lot easier. Is that instead of doing the standard way, when you're doing this stuff, when you're doing projects at this scale and this level of complexity, again, like I talked about in the beginning, I like to break everything into all its constituent parts and find the best way to plug all the Legos together to make the best, not just the best quality, but the most efficient, that whole thing. I do that as I look at a sleeve like a puzzle, and it's not just the actual artwork or how it's even going to fit on the arm with the anatomy and work. Like on that last one, getting the arm to bend where the knee bended, it's still, even though it wasn't at the knee joint, it actually looked okay for the whole thing. Those things are tough, but it really, a lot of it is figuring out how to parse the sessions into usable parts and parts that keep it going. So instead of doing the standard way for a lot of standard tattoo being, you outline, you shade, you color. We, basically with this one, we find that we're getting not just the look that we need and the ink and the skin in the right place, but it's also more manageable for them. We do, outline, shade, color, shade, outline. So we walk our way in, we walk our way back out, and you end with the second layer on the outline so that anything that gets muted, anything that gets a little fuzzy looking gets cleaned up and tightened and has that real contrasty bit. And that is a huge cherry on top because if you go back to all the photos, there's one of them in there where you can see part of where we were getting the final outline in. And there's nothing more satisfying than that. There is no way to make your client happier on a big piece than to do that final black outline in the very last day or two. And it looks brand new, but brand new in a way that looks like a better painting than it ever could have possibly been the other way. It's insane. It's so satisfying. And it looks,
I love nothing more than that last session where I get to, and I know we've talked about it before, that I love to go in because, no matter what colors you're blasting around an outline that you did 6, 8, 10 months ago, the outline gets fuzzy. And even if you're just packing light blue or yellow or whatever, it still affects outlines when it hits it.
Yeah.
And just being able to look at a final piece and be like, all right, I give myself 3 to 5 areas to like really punch an outline. I don't want to go through the whole outline. I just like that. I want some of it to set back, and I want to like establish my hierarchy and stuff, but it's by far my favorite part of
if you go down a little bit to the back piece there, I think it was on that one. Yeah, if you're look on the one where he's laying down.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I wanted to take a quick minute to thank our newest partner, our newest sponsor. I'm excited to introduce you to Tattoo Trunk. Have you heard of them? So Tattoo Trunk is a tattooer-owned, tattooer-founded, modular, portable tattoo station, tattoo setup. And if you're a traveling tattooer, you should definitely listen to what I'm saying. I personally believe that my tattoo setup is vital to a successful and efficient tattoo session. So in my home studio, everything is set up in a particular way, and it's always that way for every single tattoo. But when I've tattooed at conventions or doing guest spots at other shops, I always feel a little discombobulated and out of place. My stuff just isn't where it's supposed to be, and it kind of throws me off and takes me a little longer to adjust to the tattooing process. Well, Tattoo Trunk has solved that problem. This modular system is completely customizable. It folds in and collapses on itself to be stored neatly inside of a backpack, and then locks together in different configurations based on your needs. If you need to hold 1 ounce to 2 ounce to 4 ounce inks, different drawer systems to hold machines, cartridges, and other supplies, a bin to hold dental bibs. These guys have basically thought of it all. And as a special little bonus for Fireside viewers, subscribers, listeners, if you enter the promo code Fireside at checkout, you will get an extra 10% off of their trio or quad bundles. So like I said, if you're a traveling tattooer or just want to clean up your station, have something that's a little more put together, check out tattootrunk.com. You will find links to Tattoo Trunk somewhere around here, definitely in the description below and maybe even on the screen. Thank you to Tattoo Trunk. Thank you to you guys for supporting what we do. Let's get back to the episode.
I think when you zoomed in on that earlier, you can see part of the, oh yeah, go to the blue part on the other half of the face there. Yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can see some final outline there. That's what that is right there. And how much
Absolutely, yeah.
it brings everything back out and it just looks unreal. And it stays looking that way. So, you know, the outline, like everything else, right? If you want it to be perfect and last longest, it needs, just like everything else, it needs that extra 50% or so of ink. So I always suggest everybody do that at the end, because that way, if your color goes over it a little, you can basically give it an extra 60%, enough to make up for anything you might have gone over. Still have it look perfect and tight and tidy in the end. And it's just so damn satisfying. And the clients are just ecstatic because it just looks, you know, not only good, but it looks better than they could have ever imagined, you know. It gets me every time too. Every time I hit that stage, I'm like, fuck, I didn't realize it could look this good. You get so caught in the color and your details and patterns. But anyway, sorry, I got off track a little bit.
Yeah.
The other tricks, when you're doing a sleeve or a big piece like that, where you're talking about how the client kind of, they have a day or two that's kind of rough because they can't see the progress. I started rearranging the parts in where I do a back piece or I do a sleeve. Instead of doing the color shade outline, I gray line everything in the beginning. And I know most of us who are doing more complicated work have learned that trick, and that's a game changer. I highly recommend it for everybody for a number of reasons. But gray line your stuff in place, and then that way not only can you make, you know, alterations or take your time, but those days that you're talking about can now be gotten rid of, because basically I do half and half. So I'll be like, okay, well, I know this person wants to see a little bit of shading, or they wanted color in a certain area. So I'll do outlining, which again, you know, if you're doing a whole sleeve, especially my stuff with a lot of detail and a lot of heavy lines, like outlines are hard days. You do a, you know, solid 4 or 5 hour outline day, that person is beat the fuck up, right? They're feeling it by the end of it, no matter how nice you're trying to be to them. So I do those and I split them in half. And so let's do half the outline, and then I'll do the little part you want to do. And I'll do half the, you know, the outline again on the next one. I'll do another little part you want to do. And so you're keeping it where the progress is moving along, but they, no matter what they're excited about, they're getting to see something they like. And it also, you know, it seems to heal a lot better, because some of those days where like you do that, or say you do a ton of like super heavy black, or like in this part here with the red, those are the yellow. Actually, that was, you wouldn't believe it, the yellow is one of the toughest ones, obviously. But to get the nice crispy negative space cutout in the center of the back there with the yellow, that was a big day to get just that one light, you know, school bus, not even school bus, like light lemon yellow through that whole thing. That's a heavy fucking day, and that's gonna bleed, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna scab, it's gonna do, you know, we try to keep it all to a minimum, but you know, when you're going hard, it's, you know, getting that stuff in there buttery and smooth is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. That day right there, that yellow is
so
a day that's a mentally exhausting day, you know.
Yeah, for everybody, for me too. That's tough to see, you know, yellow. It's tough to see where you're at, and when you're in a, you know, an 18-inch field of yellow, you can lose your place, man. Yeah, so on those days, I'll do that, and then I'll find something that's satisfying for them, and so that helps you kind of break those other parts up. It makes big, hard, heavy days like that much easier to handle too, because you can do this really, really tough foundation bit, and then, you know, do some very light, you know, slow machine shading somewhere that's really satisfying to look at. And so, you know, by knowing all the parts of the back piece and the sleeve, and having a plan, and having a realistic expectation of how many hours it's going to take, now we can figure out how to break those into parts where we can get those in. Because in the end, you know, if we're talking about big, complicated stuff, what stops most people is simply the amount of time or money that has to go into it. It's just so much. And so if we don't find a way to be efficient and trim every last extra hour that didn't have to be in there out of it, by doing that, by, you know, rearranging the parts, getting rid of stuff we don't need, all that, these things will just never get done. These big, ambitious projects can't get done if you don't have a to Z plan for all the parts. You know, you don't necessarily have to start there, but I suggest for anybody who's looking at doing this stuff, the best thing you can do is start writing everything down, start taking photos of every stage, keep track of what blends of color, what company of color, what mag size you use, and what speed you got in what areas, so you see the results. And this all sounds like way too much, I know it, but it becomes so important. See, that's that black again too, but that's healed. Yeah, go back up on the lines. See, that looks new, like that new second layer, but that's a few months afterwards still. So it just, you get that second layer and it just stays new looking, man. It's crazy. I've seen some people getting close to 20 years with these layered projects, and they are in the sun and they surf and they beat their tattoos up and they still look fucking pretty new. You know, they look pretty fucking good, man. The saturation stays, lines are still going to do what lines do, but that's why we, if we can, work big, open up your work and go bold with the lines, but space everything way out if you can get away with it,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm completely with you on that. And like I was saying earlier, I think that it's one of the great teaching tools, for yourself, like learning tools, is to see what you can, like what it looks like when you layer. And I love that you said like 2.5 layers. I like the idea of that, like half layer, like, you have a couple of chances to get a field solid.
Yeah.
Like you can hit that twice, but like right here, this is what I keep going back to. This area to me is the most interesting layer that I'm looking at.
Yeah,
in this
that
photo.
half layer, actually, this must have been before we finished, because that half layer was just those purples that are a little chunky looking there. So we went through and blended spots like that for that half layer at the end. And so that was our final touch, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But yeah, that's why you got to leave yourself room for error, but also knowing that if you go over 2.5, half being shading or maybe just a little color, or sometimes line work, depending on how heavy it is, then that's really all you can get away with before the skin starts to change. And for me, that's the place to call it too, where it's like, if we're going to think about making this a good part of tattooing as an art form and making it really worthwhile, we have to figure out where to call those limits. And so like anything over that is good. If I can get away with 1.5 layers, I want to do 1.5 layers. But 2.5 layers, if it ever gets there, if it ever gets to 2.5, that's where I pull the plug on that. And I'm like, we got to rethink this, because this is just not feasible, or it's going to turn into just a albatross of a project. It's just going to be a problem for everybody. But yeah, and here I think at the end we went through and we blended a few of those, the color lines. I think these were on the left there that you were just looking at down there with the purples and where it fades and the color lines fade too. We hadn't done the second layer through those yet. So I think we went through and did the color lines and the lighter part. You can see actually the darker blue. We did the second pass on the dark blue color lines there, but we hadn't done the lighter ones yet. And we did that, the blend in the purples and the transition on there. So I think we did that, a little bit of yellow. This is the nature of all these spots.
Yeah, and just this, like the fact that where this sits on the body, like
the armpit,
that kind of tells the story right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's your bread and butter. If you're going to medium scale to a large scale, your technical game has got to be good, because even if you're really good at this, a lot of those areas are still not going to look that good in the end. It's the nature of that skin. So if you're only kind of good at that, man, those areas are going to be a fucking disaster.
Oh yeah, I mean, this would be a disaster. Most people would have just let this fall out. The fact that not only did you finish it, but you made the color line transition, the purple to yellow transition, and all of it is like,
try to do what we can, but that's just
it. Dude, you're kind of like, I look at that and I go like, you're just kind of a lunatic in a lot of ways. Like, crazy.
That's part of why having these efficient plans and formulas, so you can break all the parts up and remix them. That's where that. And for me, that's why vintage print illustration is a style I was really drawn to. Some of it, like I said, color use wise is not necessarily my favorite all the time. And I like the ones that I did here a lot for sure, but it's not my go-to. They're very often a little too many colors and chaotic, but it's the usage of the color, the way it has a big, just like the screen print, it has a big flat color that goes down. And then if you're going to get a gradient, that's half a layer. If you're going to do line work pattern over it, that's half a layer. If I go back a little bit, I go out to the main photos again. That's what I was going to point out, is that there is one or two that's an example of a 2-layer to 2.5-layer detail one. Go back out again. It's a different one. The samurai girl's got the pattern on her kimono. Well, there's Dolly. She's a good example of. Oh, there you go. You just passed it. Well, yeah, that's the same one. But go to the next one. You can see it a little better on the kimono. You zoom in on that pattern, like on the red and the squares, and that's the same thing there. So basically, we put down one flat layer of red, and then the yellow, and then you do, basically we did a light pink for the pattern, and then we did the red shading, and it was real slow. That was with I think we did with either a 3 or a 5 round for the darker red in there, so we get a little bit of gradient in the background. But those, in here, that's a much more complicated one, because the light over dark, that needs the extra layer. That's where you go to 2.5. So like you were saying before, how you did the lighter color over a guy's darker color, it's totally doable, but it requires yet another additional layer. And that's why I like my math to go backwards. It just seems like it's more efficient and more in line with what the skin wants us to do. So I like to do light layer underneath, dark layer on top. but that's not to say it can't be done. So this one, we got a little bit of both. And so we were able to have a lot of fun with the textures in there. And, but otherwise, most of them are just that. They're just one big, simple, flat pass with a little bit of detail over top. And so it can look like, and I mean, it is still quite a lot of detail and quite a lot, but it's actually much more efficient than you might think for a lot of that.
Yeah. This one's incredible. I was looking at this earlier. That's absolutely crazy. Let me open it up because we're an hour and 20 minutes in. Let me open it up for some questions. I've got to run to the bathroom. I drank 2 beers. Someone start the questions, whoever's the boldest who has something to ask, and I'll be back in like 30 seconds. Someone ask a question. Yeah, Coop, he goes.
Are you using this spoon? Oh.
What was that? Sorry, kind of echo there.
Can you hear me, Coop? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
Okay, cool. So I was just gonna ask about your application techniques. So I took your seminar and you explained how you did this hexagonal sort of approach.
Yeah, the hex method.
Right. And so as you're going, like, are you applying this hex, like pattern so consistently that when you give it that second layer or that second and a half layer, that you're actually, are you kind of like, are you still like going over that in the same pattern, or is it just kind of random whenever?
I'm not so much. I mean, in a way, yes, because the hex method is more just like a format, almost as if you have like a one of those drawing tools where everything snaps to a grid kind of thing. So, you can do, especially for shading and large fields of gray like we did in our workshops. That's the best way to not only get the best control for black and gray shading, large fields and crisp edges, but it's also the most efficient so that you can get it all done in a reasonable amount of time. Anyway, the same logic applies to color, but being that color is the way it is, if you get, I don't know if you remember how much time we spent on getting the angles of the mags just right. But when you get that combined with the speed, combined with the side to side method, that's my main driver for everything. Regardless of machine, it's that combination of things, because you can color like that red field through there. I could probably have done that whole thing in an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. And have all the red on that kimono done, because you can drive through that big flat layer so fast. But you do have to be super efficient, where you're basically zipping those patterns perfectly together, but you're also hitting it hard enough that I wouldn't want to do another layer over it and another, of the 3 different, directional things for the hex method. I just pick one and I do these rows like you're mowing the lawn, and that's it. So we just do the one. And then you let it heal. And then if I need to do another layer, then I'll pick a different direction. It's hard to tell, but you get an eye for it over time, where you can look at that thing and you can see you can barely see a little bit of texture in where those went in. And so if you ever have to do another pass, then you pick a second one, and ideally a second one in a different size mag, because it'll leave slightly different textures, and then it'll be really velvety, perfect, super saturated, all that stuff. But, in a perfect world, especially when we're doing complicated stuff like that, we aren't going to probably have a chance to do a second pass. So it really needs to go in perfect, one solid field, one single pass, solid fill, perfect, But that's what I try for, because then we go back on the second one. But you'll notice, just like anybody else, I'm not perfect. All skin is certainly not perfect. The skin is imperfect, the most imperfect medium we can get, probably. So there's going to be little things, and that's why that's also built into the system for efficiency, meaning that's why we have to leave ourselves at least an extra half layer. If we know we can go up to 2.5 layers when we're building something out, we don't want to, in our planning phase, think about, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to use all 2.5, because then there's nowhere to go when something heals wrong, or somebody got sunburned, or whatever bullshit life happens. So that's where being on your technical game and having the speeds and the hand motions, everything perfect, is so important, because you really don't get to bridge into that stuff much without either having to go back in and do way too many layers, and then the skin texture gets fucked up and you get scarring or whatever else could happen, all sorts of bad things, or you just end up not getting shit done and leaving like marbled or gap spots. So like, unfortunately, it means that like you got to be like super, super, super on that, you know, just getting large flat fields. It's really a shame in a way that tribal isn't popular in the same way that it used to be, because that was the best practice. That's the easiest and best way to learn how to do single pass fills perfect and still make sure that it, you know, doesn't, it's not killing the client with pain, or it doesn't heal terrible, because there is a paper thin perfect layer and perfect angle, and if you hit it just right, all those things line up and it's just perfect. But once you figure that out with black, then you can do that with color, and that's where I did that yellow, the big, you know, negative space cut out of yellow on that guy's back, and all the other foundation layers. Same thing. That was one single pass, and you could see just like same thing, getting to the armpit and a few areas on the guy's back. The skin will do what skin does, and there will, even if it looked perfect, you know, 2 months later, you know, 6 months later, you might see a few light spots and stuff. So you need that second, you know, 2.5 layer kind of thing. You need an extra half layer somewhere so that you can brush into those areas and you know, not fuck it up. You fix the blend or fill in gaps and that kind of thing. And that's also why it's super important when you're doing these big ambitious projects, that you just got to keep so many notes, man. It's like it's a pain in the ass. It's hard to get used to, but it is probably one of the more important things you can do. Because one thing that I've found is that you really can't predict how people's skin are going to take to everything. It's I use a lot of different machines, needle setups. You know, most of the formula for the hex method stays the same, but everybody's skin takes different stuff differently, and so they'll take really well to one machine and not another, and it's not going to be the same for everybody at all. You know, I've got a few machines that almost everybody universally hates, but you get 1 or 2 people and they love it and their skin loves it and it goes well. So when I start on some of these big fields and these big kind of heavy lifting parts of a project and the foundation layer, and we test 2 or 3 machines to see which one's going to do better. That way, as you do the rest of it, it's going to be so much faster, so much easier. They're going to sit easier for it and not have as hard of a time coming back and showing up and, you know, all that kind of stuff too. But that does unfortunately mean we got to learn to not just stick to one machine, one way of doing everything, or letting ourselves get a little too fast and loose with how we're applying it. Because most of us, when we get tired or not paying attention, we default into like scribbling fast, and that's where the technique starts to fall apart, stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that's such a huge thing, is recognizing exhaustion or recognizing lack of interest or distraction and finding a solution for that, you know, like being vigilant about finding a solution, especially when you get into bigger stuff, you know, where you have whatever, a half an hour of light yellow that you have to do in the middle of the back, and the client's starting to pinch their shoulder blades together and they're caused like, you know, you like recognizing that stuff and learning to find a solution for it, which is normally a break, you know, look into something
that's the
different.
efficiency. Yet another kind of that falls into, again, efficiency is a boring word. That's kind of what houses all of these things. It's all the things we don't think about until they've already kind of fucked us up for a year or two, right? And then we learn the hard way. So part of that is, how do you not try to push through or be so ambitious? Somebody comes in, they're like, oh, I want a sleeve, and I'm gonna, you know, we're gonna sit for a 9-hour session, just get it done, and we're all gonna pat ourselves on the back for how tough we are for doing that, not realizing that, you know, now for the last 3 hours you were pushing through, you started missing details, things don't blend so well, they are squirming in the chair and they're going to heal like shit, you know. So you find that there are sweet spots for everything, and that's one of the other metrics we have to learn to balance, is like your attention span, man. You know, where are you going to be fully engaged? How long can you do that? What's normal? Can you build that up, or is there a natural limit that you won't go past? Exhaustion, just where you think about other shit, home life balance, you know, the boring stuff, but these become vital. And you have to find a system that allows for every one of these contingencies. Otherwise, you know, if you just ignore it, you'll just ignore it until it train wrecks you at some point, you know? So, but that is a big part of that. I like to break my sessions into 3, I always plan 3 hours for people. More often than not, we go longer. But that, I think from a management standpoint, that's been my most successful way of doing it, because it's also a little less intimidating for a lot of people if they're coming in regular sessions. You know, 3 hours every 3 weeks is not a big deal. 2 hours every 2 weeks, 4 hours every 4 weeks, some combination where the weeks equal the hours basically. But then when they come in, then they can go for longer. And I found that about 5 hours is about where I start to lose my focus and my back hurts and all that stuff. After injuring my back, I learned it that way first. And then I found as we were doing that, everybody else, they want to be tough. Everybody wants to be the guy saying, oh, I'm going to do fucking 21 hours straight and get it all done. But then of course, when it comes to actually doing it, all these other things start coming up. So if I give them the excuse, I always tell everybody now, my back actually feels really good now, but I always tell everybody, I can't, my back hurts. I got to stop. And so I stop once an hour, no matter what, and get up and walk around. And I encourage them to do it. And I give them a snack and some water and, these kind of things. And it helps them go a lot longer so that when we do hit that 3 hour mark, they're usually feeling really good. And then I also learned it, yet another thing, cut them off when they feel like they have about 20% left in the tank. That's where I stop them, because then, shit wears off, endorphins wear off, and then that's when they crash. And then, if they try to push past that, the healing will do that. And then you guys got to go back and do an extra hour over again to fix everything. But the sweet spot, 3 hours. I tell them 3, we end up doing 3 to 5 in most cases. And I just tell them every time, like, my back hurts. I can't, I gotta stop. I gotta move around an hour, and I won't do more than 3. And that way they don't have to feel like they were tapping out. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take the hit for the team. It's fine.
I think that's an important point. Like where they understand that you're also, kind of hitting your wall as well. And it gives them permission to be like, yeah, I was starting to feel that too. So James, you had your hand up a minute ago, or did your question get answered?
Well, I mean, it did. I just wanted to say how much I really enjoyed using the hex method. Like, I've really been working with it. And I think it really showed a market improvement in my, application. So I just want to thank Coop. Really, it's a great seminar.
Cool,
It really is. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Happy to
It's
help.
yeah. Thank you very much. It's really great technique.
Yeah,
So.
I wish I could take all the credit for it. It's actually, all the parts originally come from my mentor. I think I'm the one that probably put it together and streamlined it. But yeah, the credit mostly got to go to him. But yeah, I'm glad, man. I'm glad you're getting some use out of it. And once you learn that, I think you'll see that too. Like we were talking about with Mickey a second ago there.
Yeah, that was me too. But I was just gonna say real quick. I think there's something, there is, of course, like, what you're saying about like not creating perpendicular angles. But the other thing is like paying attention to the equipment, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that your machine is actually has enough punch, has enough torque to like put it in the skin at the right level, at the right sort of like hand speed. All that stuff, I think, is it's not. I hadn't really considered it that much before. So anyway, I just wanted to say, like, again, it's a nice way to think about how how the ink is going in and how we're putting it in. And it's a few things. So anyway, it's really great.
Once we're aware of those things, we can be way more deliberate with it. If we can slow down, we can be really precise with it. And we end up getting way more done in less time and less pain and less money and all the stuff that stops us sometimes from doing the cool shit we want to do. So I'm glad you're getting use out of it, man. Try that with the color too. Like I said, you don't generally need to cross directions with color. Like if you get your timing and everything down, you'll get single pass color with it really well. And you're going to fill these big, flat, solid areas. And because you only hit it once, when you hit that sweet spot where you only hit it once, you get that perfect 100% solid fill in one pass, everything heals like a dream. You can do stuff that normally you would expect it to heal kind of rough. And then, they're leaving and it doesn't even look that red and they tell you it didn't scab or any of that stuff, but it's there. It's there to be got, but it takes some practice. So, keep with that and start applying it to color, man. I think you'll like it.
One thing too with all James, I forget the wording that you used specifically, but all the variables and things that come into it. The thing that I've come to believe is that there's not a correct like order of operations that everyone should follow, but whatever you do, like, you show up each day and you use this machine to line and you started at 6.5 volts or 7.5 volts or whatever it is. And that's your starting, that's your A. and then something won't work. And you need to know what B is. Is B changing voltage up or down, or is B changing the angle of approach, or is B changing the stretch of the skin? Like, you need to know what B is, and then you need to know what C is, and you need to decide for yourself. And Cooper or I or whoever can't tell you what that is. I mean, we can tell you what we do, but your order of operations is your order of operations. You need to have a thing that I start with every time. And this is I know, like 90 or whatever, 60% of the time, this will solve the problem. But when it doesn't, this is the thing I do next. If that doesn't work, this is the thing I do next. If that doesn't work, this is the thing I do next.
And that's another thing too, where again, it's boring as shit, but I swear to God, you guys, it'll change your life. Get a little sheet of paper, write down on every single session you do with somebody, write those little things down. How far did I put the throw? What, speed was the machine running at? What needle combination? And keep photos of every session, because when something heals great, you'll know exactly what you did. Exactly. And when something went bad, you'll at least have a good idea of what happened. And so all those margins of error where things shift and move, those margins get tiny, man. By doing all that writing stuff down, your technical game will skyrocket. You just need enough time to accumulate that information. It's hard to get in the habit of writing it down, but when you do, man, that will really change you. You will get technical, you will get faster, your stuff will heal better. All the good things will start to happen all at once. It's really huge. And you'll find that there's a mentality a lot of us have as tattooers, at least I can say from my generation, where they don't want to even know the voltage they're running the machine at. It's like, oh man, I just do it by ear, I get it right every time, and then it's funny because I've worked with enough guys like that, and I was like that guy for a minute too. And so I started writing stuff down, and I noticed that, the guy who gets it by ear every time, if I can see the number on his thing and I write it down, and then he says the same thing the next day and the next day and the next day, they're all wildly different. So the idea of what you think it is and what it actually ends up being very often will be off. And I found that when I started applying that to myself, of course, very much off. I thought I was getting it right, but who knows, man? You're you're feeling a little different. You slept different. You got some shit you're thinking about. You're listening to faster, slower music. There's so many variables that change your perception of how you're running a machine that, go all over the fucking place. So when you write it down, you'll find that like this machine, to get what I want out of it now, like I have that like on all my machines, but of course I fully am that guy. I write it down on the machine itself. This machine's good for this voltage at this range with this combination. But then I can do that. And every time I sit down, that's why I can do a large field of yellow in just a couple hours, or, something like that, because I don't have to experiment. I know this machine runs at exactly 5.8 with a 9 mag, and I can go to town and I can get everything done. There's no experimentation. From the first time we're touching the needle down, we're fucking going. And you need that efficiency. If you're going to get into big, ambitious stuff, the guesswork, all of us spend a lot more time muddled up in guesswork than we realize. And, that's an important part of being an artist, and especially the system. By the way, don't use my system, guys. I'm encouraging you to build your own system, figure it out. We all should be artists and figuring our own stuff out. And, that way.
That's what I was saying with that.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's a pain in the ass to set up. My ADD brain never wanted to do it. I took way too many years getting around to doing it. But goddamn, what a life changer. It really, everything was so much easier, so much more satisfying. And so many of the little tiny aggravations and frustrations that, tattooing can be the greatest thing, but it can also be the thing that just fucking makes you feel like you don't know anything and you're just starting all over every once in a while, right? Those days, like they're 95% gone after doing that. After I started writing all those details down, you don't get all of them. You just write some of the details down, some of the big ones, and keep track of them with the client on a project, and just keep them on a little stick-it note or whatever. God, you'll see a trend, and then all of a sudden you're going to follow that trend for the next piece, and you're going to get it done in 2/3 the time that the first one took you, and it'll look better and it'll have healed better, and the client will want to do another one because you did it under budget and faster than you said you could. And so all these good things start piling up.
Yeah,
that's it up there.
Yeah, Kurt, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, man. Sorry, I gotta go. But I wanted to say thank you again, man. As always, and incredible information, and I do appreciate how much time and energy you put into putting it together and delivering it. About the gauntlet thing, man. If you, I think you have my cell, man. Text me anytime.
Yeah, that's a long conversation. We'll want to do that in person, but let's definitely do that.
Well, yeah, call me,
Hey.
text me, we'll set it up. I'm happy to do it.
Hey, Kurt and I are doing, and for everyone here, Kurt and I are doing we're trying to put together a collab for a client in Richmond this October. But Richmond is stacked this year. You should try to come out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Look at the lineup and look at the educational. We've got we got Greg Simpkins, Crayola, coming out to do this.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that guy in ages.
Yeah. You should try to come out. And Kurt and I are splitting the booth. And we're gonna try to do a collab.
Yes.
Really, he's such a nice dude. I like that guy. I mean, amazing painter too, obviously. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
cool, man. I don't know. I'm kind of, literally, like I said, I'm just moving into the studio.
I
So
hear you.
might be tied for a while. I kind of lost a little motivation to travel after that. I don't know if I told you, after that last time getting back in the airport, I got crazy sick, like in the hospital for a week sick, like, that kind of shit.
After Paradise?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
Oh.
so like I don't know. I feel like it kind of took a little of my motivation out, but I'll get back there. And maybe I'll just take a road trip or something. I'm a little wary about
little
flying
gun
now.
shy right now.
This is one of those flights where, like, you're there if they overpacked and there's people coughing on your face from every direction, and one of those things. So it's like, just the idea of going to an airport doesn't seem like a lot of fun right now. But yeah, maybe I'll make a road trip, man.
You should. It's going to be a great trip. We got stacked educational and just stacked. I mean, obviously the show is always stacked. That's a good show. But yeah, you should try to come up with that. I wanted to say real quick, and thanks, Kurt. If you're, he's probably already gone. I wanted to say real quick, you're talking about making notes. And another way that I think to do that, and something I recommend for beginning tattooers, I'm flipping through people that are on the Zoom right now and trying to figure out who's where in their career. But if you're early on, I think that, like, not only photographing your tattoos, like we should all be doing, but when things feel like they worked well, photograph that area. When you got to areas that feel like they didn't work well, or you're questioning them, photograph that area multiple times in close, and just make a Dropbox folder for that client. And then when they come back, even if they're just coming back, even if it's a one shot and you're getting them to come back for healed photos, comparing the healed version of something to the fresh version of something was probably the most valuable thing that I got to do. And I didn't get to do it for years, because when I started tattooing, it was regular film cameras. We developed film twice a year, so it was like nothing. Yeah, it was almost impossible. Now it's so easy to look at fresh and healed photos side by side. And I believe that in addition to that is essentially note taking, but note taking in that way, like visually, like, okay, that's splotchy and swells weird. What is it? That's what it looks like now, fresh. What's it look like healed? Oh yeah, that's what I thought. Or this felt like it went in like butter. What's it look like healed? That's like visual note taking.
That's huge. And it's actually a lot easier for guys that have an iPad and work off of there, because all you need to do is just whip out the camera, especially if using Procreate, just add another layer, do a photo right on the layer, just circle the area and be like question mark, and just write the date, and then, like, there you go. Like, for me now, I saved myself a lot of time in the note. I talked about taking all these extra notes. Honestly, I use the iPad for most of it. It's gotten easier, because now when I do inks, I basically leave all the inks I use on the counter right by the ink caps, right behind it, so I can get them all in one photo. And then I just basically take one shot and write the date on the session. I draw a line to the bottle of the percentage. And so it's just a couple of scribbles. But then that way, 6 months later, if I need to match this exact tone and fade, I can get that exact part, the exact percentage and everything, but I don't have to write down 30 fucking inks, whatever. So, but yeah, I highly recommend that. You can just have like a 30 layer fucking piece for each of your clients.
Yeah, definitely. Nicole and Medusa both said they got sick after Paradise as well. I'll tell you what you guys all have in common. You're all out west and you guys try to be healthy. Move to the dirty, dirty, dirty South, Memphis, Tennessee. You won't get sick, man. I haven't been sick since I was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to get where you just live in disgusting germs.
Yeah. What got me is the altitude up here. Because, I just come from California to sea level. So yeah, I got fucking, I don't know. I got all the shit you could catch, fucking COVID, pneumonia, and fucking the flu, all the shit, literally all on that one flight, everything all at once. So I was at that, and then I come back here where you can't breathe anyway, and I was out, man. I was in bad shape, but acclimating. But yeah, maybe that'll do it. Go to the South and spend a lot of time walking around fucking barefoot. Shit'll toughen you up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, this is awesome. We're almost 2 hours in. Anyone have any like parting ideas, thoughts, questions? Anthony, you turned your camera on. You have to have something to say.
What is that?
What, Anthony is on, but I can't hear him. He's not muted. Maybe your headphones aren't. Unplug and replug your headphones or something.
How about that?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
All right. Yeah, I just want to say hi. Hey, I'm in Richmond, and I wanted to second the vote for you to come hang
I've
out.
heard nothing but good things about Richmond. I talked to Tom Strom right before he was leaving, right as I was coming here to Denver. And yeah, so we kind of got to hear about that a little bit. And God, there's so many good artists in Richmond. It really seems like it'd be great. I talked to Smith too, and he was setting that up. And I do need to make it out there for sure. By the way, you're in Memphis, Jake. You're in Memphis, right?
I'm in Memphis. I'm actually in Anthony's home. I'm in Asheville right now, which is where Anthony came from. But yeah, I live in Memphis. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Have I connected you with Turk yet? I think you'd really like him. I think you guys would do great.
Is he in Memphis?
I feel like it was, but maybe I need to check that.
Maybe not, Nashville. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, you might be right. It might be Nashville. But either way, if you for the kind of people you have on there just doing something video, he's not just a phenomenal artist, but he's great to have on this kind of thing too. So
yeah, I'd love to, man. If you want to do a group text or introduce me, that'd be great. You have mentioned his name. That name stands out to me, Turk. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. So.
Very cool. Anybody else got any questions? I feel like I got to wrap it up here soon too, so I don't want to leave anybody out.
Yeah, Dan has his hand raised. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. One, Cooper, again, as Kurt said, thank you so much for your time and energy, for coming on here and just giving out so much information. Every time you're on the podcast or every time you do a seminar, it's just just a waterfall of great information. And really great for people like me in my position. I actually just started my apprenticeship. So like a lot of the stuff you said, especially in the beginning, with like what makes a good tattoo artist, that's so helpful for people like me. And, just to, keep in mind throughout my career to constantly be checking those three sections of that diagram, always be looking at it, always making sure that I'm, covering all the bases for the most part. And if you could send the updated version of that, I will add it to the show notes for this video. Just shoot it over to Jake or me or whichever. But yeah, again, thank you so much. I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say all that. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I if you're doing that too, I recommend it to everybody with that kind of thing. People learn better if you're not spread too thin. So, that diagram or any kind of, list combination of, stuff you're going to put together to try to learn, you're going to do so much better if you just find out where you're at on that thing, pick one thing and just focus solely on that. Don't, it's good to know the others are out there, but don't get overwhelmed. Don't try to do everything. Just pick one thing. Right. Be like, man, I'm going to live in this little area for 6 months. I'm going to really focus on this bit. And then, when you feel like that one's getting comfortable, then take the next one on, and you will gain so much more, so much faster that way. I think I made the mistake like a lot of people do. It's like, oh, I got to be all things to all people. And of course, you just fucking burn out. That's all that happens. You burn out.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. That really helps me just sort of like find a way to focus, especially whenever I'm, so early on. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
man. Good one, man. Great one, Coop. I really, I do really appreciate you taking the time. I always learn something. I always enjoy the conversation. I just love the amount of, you're inspirational to me because like you've been tattooing a real long time, but you're always finding something to be like fascinated by and engaged in, and a reason to like get up and do something different today than you did yesterday. And I when you get to our like level, not level, but when you get to our like years in this trade, it's hard to find plumbers that are interested in plumbing at 30 years, and so it's it is inspirational to listen to you talk. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. A big part of what makes that work is, being around other people that are excited. They keep your fire lit and keep new ideas coming at you, and that kind of thing. Out here, since I've got here, it hasn't been I guess maybe a year and a half or so. We're already starting to get like drawing nights and a little community, like Denver tattoo community, like a little quick education things at a local art store. They give us like the upper floor there and let us do our thing every once in a while. And those kind of things have been like super valuable. I think going both ways, I like to be able to teach stuff to other people, but every single time I learn a lot too and have a good time. So I think these kind of things are what keep me excited, man. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And we'd love, we do this club all the time. We have critique nights, drawing nights, everything in between. So I'd love to have you participate, maybe help with a critique night one night if you have any interest in. We do drawing challenges at the end of the month. We look at everyone's drawings. We do critiques.
Well, my OCD ass, Jake. I got a system for that too, right?
I'm sure I know you do. I'll reach out. We'll try to make it happen.
All right, thanks for spending a little time with us. I hope you got something out of that. Like I said, if you would like to be a part of these discussions going forward, we do these at least once every single month, along with Mindset Mondays and drawing challenges and lots of other events in the club. I'd love to have you try it out and see if it might be something that helps you grow your tattoo skill set. What else? I think that's it. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.